Welcome to the Ultimate Sports Podcast. Today is Wednesday, October 9th, 2019. Today I'm going to recap yesterday's Game 4 between the Astros and the Rays and look ahead to today's 2 Game 5s in the National League. Hockey, we'll go over last night's results and look ahead to tonight's slate. WNBA Finals, Game 4, we'll go over those results. NBA Preseason, NHL Power Rankings, bowl projections for Week 7 of college football, a pick for tonight's college football game between UL Lafayette, who has been a surprise in the Sun Belt this year, against the class of the Sun Belt, the Appalachian State Mountaineers, and then obviously you have the best bet of the day as well. All right, we're going to start in baseball. The Tampa Bay Rays have forced a Game 5 with a 4-1 victory over the Houston Astros, and the series is now tied at 2 apiece. Getting the win in this game was Ryan Yarbrough. The loss, Justin Verlander, and Blake Snell gets his first career save. Bottom of the first, home run Tommy Pham off of Verlander, 1-0 Rays. RBI single Travis d'Arnaud, Jaiman Choi scores, 2-0 Rays. RBI double Joey Wendell, Avisail Garcia scores, 3-0 Rays, and that was all off of Verlander. Bottom of the fourth, also off of Verlander, a home run by Willie Adames to make it 4-0. Verlander was out of there by, I think, midway through the fourth or the fifth inning. We'll get to the pitching statistics in a minute. And the top of the eighth, the Astros got on the board with the home run by Robinson Chirinos to make it 4-1. And then the Astros threatened a little bit in the ninth, but Kevin Cash went to Snell, and he got the last few outs of the game to get the save. Diego Castillo was the opener. He was pretty good. An inning and 2/3, a hit, no runs, a walk, and 3 strikeouts. Yarbrough followed 2 innings, 2 hits. Nick Anderson, 2 1/3 innings, 1 hit, 2 strikeouts. Colin Pache, an inning and 2/3, a hit, an earned run. So he gave up the Chirinos homer, struck out 2. Emilio Pagan, 2/3 of an inning, a hit, no runs, and a walk. And then Snell in relief, 2/3 of an inning, no hits, no runs, no walks, and a strikeout. Meanwhile, Houston, Verlander, 3 2/3 innings, 7 hits, 4 runs, 3 walks, 5 strikeouts, rate 3.38. Josh James, a third of an inning, a hit, no earned runs, no walks, and a strikeout. Jose Urquidy, an inning and 2/3, 3 hits, no runs, a walk, and 3 strikeouts. Ryan Presley, a third of an inning, scoreless. Joe Smith, a scoreless inning. He pitched in the 7th, and then Will Harris pitched the 8th. 2 hits, 2 strikeouts. And now Game 5's tomorrow night, and we'll pick it on tomorrow's podcast. Tonight, 2 Game 5s, both in the National League, 5 o'clock, TBS, Cardinals, Braves. Jack Flaherty, Mike Foltynewicz are your starting pitchers. And then on the call of the game on TBS, you have Brian Anderson and Ron Darling. Should be a fun Game 5. I think it'll be low scoring. It'll be competitive. Won't be surprised if this goes to extra innings, but I think it's more unlikely because both these starting pitchers are very good. And I could see a world where one of these teams has a lead going into the 9th inning and the closer actually gets the job done. But ultimately, the pitching staff I trust the most is the Cardinals. They have the best starting pitcher going in this game in Jack Flaherty. If Atlanta's wise, they can use some of their starters out of the bullpen. But I don't know if they'll go that route. And certainly I don't think the Cardinals will go that route because they have a solid bullpen. John Brebbia, Andrew Miller, Carlos Martinez, and a few others that they really like to get big outs for them. I mean, the Braves' pen has been shaky. Shane Green gave up that rally in the 8th inning in game number 4. Mark Melancon blew the save in game 1. They have Max Fried coming out of the bullpen. He's a starter. Julio Teheran gave up the walk-off sac fly. So I'm going to take the Cardinals here to win Game 5. And by the way, the best position player on the field is not actually on the Cardinals. It's Ronald Acuna Jr. of the Braves. And he's the best player in this game. But this is a pitching playoffs. and the Pitchers League, which is the National League. So give me Flaherty and the Cardinals. I think they win like a 3-2 game. Won't be surprised if the Braves have the tying runs on base in the ninth inning and Carlos Martinez gets out of it. Or if I'm them, Andrew Miller should be in the game in the ninth inning, not Carlos Martinez. But anyway, I think the Cardinals will win and move on to the National League Championship Series. 8:30 TBS. Ernie Johnson, Jeff Francoeur on the call. Steven Strasburg against Walker Buehler. This was so tough to pick. There are so many cases for the Dodgers, and there are so many cases for the Nationals. The case for the Nationals is that the pressure's not on you. You can play free and loose, and that gives you an advantage, especially if the team like the Dodgers is such a big favorite over you. And that just puts a lot of pressure on the Dodgers. And the case for the Dodgers is that they probably have the more talented pitcher on the mound tonight in Walker Buehler. They have the better bullpen, although both these bullpens have struggled in this series. They also have the better offense. Meanwhile, their MVP, Cody Bellinger, has struggled in this series mightily. Meanwhile, Anthony Rendon struggled early on in this series. He's the Nationals MVP player. He actually turned it around these last few games in Washington, so maybe he's about to get hot. The Dodgers are planning on using Clayton Kershaw in the bullpen tonight, which I think is smart. And I think that the Nationals may do the same with Patrick Corbin and perhaps Max Scherzer again. In this game, probably not Scherzer, more likely Corbin. But we'll see. And we saw that Corbin self-combusted in Game 3. But anyway, I just think the pressure is on the Dodgers. And there's a serious Ewing theory going on with the Nationals right now without Bryce Harper. And I'm not suggesting that the reason why the Nationals haven't been good in the playoffs is because of Bryce Harper. It's just that they're a better team without Bryce Harper, clearly. And it's really shown out this season. And that's nothing against Bryce Harper. He just didn't fit with this team. And he's somebody that has a bit of a personality. And he's still a great player. But the Nationals didn't need him. And now there's a serious Ewing theory against them. Or going their way. Against Harper, I should say. And the Nationals, I think, will actually win this game tonight. I did pick the Dodgers to win this series, but I just have a funny feeling about it. I'm buying this Ewing theory that the Nets have going for them. Pressure's on the Dodgers. I think the losing manager of this game might lose their job, especially if it's Dave Roberts. I think Davey Martinez probably saved his job in the wild card game, because if they lost that game, he's fired. But if they lose this game because of a bad managerial mistake, similar to what Joe Girardi did against the Indians a few years ago, although Girardi ended up getting fired after the next round when they lost to Houston, then I could see a world where Davey's fired, but I don't think Davey will be fired, win or lose. I think if Roberts loses here, he's out, and the Dodgers will be managerial hunt searching and probably going to try for Joe Madden, like the Angels are and the Padres and all these other teams looking for new managers are. So I think Strasburg goes out there, pitches great. I think Buehler will be great. Kershaw has been fine coming out of the bullpen in his career. I've seen him doing a couple big games. I think 2017 World Series, he came out of the bullpen for Yu Darvish and was fine. He obviously closed out the National Series in 2016 at Washington in that Game 5. So he's had some experiences out of the bullpen. I just think that Strasburg and the possibility of Scherzer on deck is really crazy and enticing. Like I said, won't be surprised at all if the Dodgers win, but I just have a funny feeling about the Nats and that mojo is on their side. So give me the Nationals to pull off a big upset tonight in the NLDS, and it'll be Nationals-Cardinals in the National League Championship Series, as the Dodgers are going to perhaps be looking for a new manager come next week. NHL was a pretty busy slate last night. The Hurricanes defeat the Panthers 6-3 to remain undefeated. They're 4-0-0. The Panthers are 1-2-0. Number one started the game with 2 goals, Ryan Zingle. Number 2 started the game with a goal and assist, Teuvo Teravainen. Number 3 started the game with 47 saves on 50 shots, James Reiner. So, a really good game for their goaltender as well. Oilers over the Islanders 5-2. The Oilers are undefeated. They're 3-0-0. The Islanders are 1-2-1. Number 1 started the game with 4 goals, James Neal. Number 2 started the game with 3 assists, Connor McDavid. Number 3 started the game with 2 assists, Leon Draisaitl. The Jets defeated the Penguins 4-1. The Jets with the big win, they're 2-2. Pittsburgh's 1-2. Number 1 started the game with 3 assists, Mark Sheffley. Number 2 started the game with 3 assists, Patrick Laine. Number 3 started the game with a goal, Tucker Poolman. The Stars defeated the Capitals 4-3 in overtime on a goal by Tyler Seguin. So that was a big win for Dallas, their first win of the year. They're 1-3. Washington 2-0-2. Number 1 started the game with a goal and assist, Tyler Seguin. Number 2 started the game with the goal, Nick Camano. And then number 3 started the game with the goal and assist, Nicholas Backstrom. Ducks over the Red Wings 3-1. Both of these teams were undefeated going into this game, and Anaheim came out on top. They're 3-0-0. Detroit's 2-1-0. Number 1 started the game with the goal and assist, Jacob Silfverberg. Number 2 started the game with the goal, Nick Ritchie. Number 3 started the game with a goal, Philip Hronik. The Predators over the Sharks 5-2. The Predators go to 2-1-0. San Jose is still winless at 0-4-0. Number 1 started the game with 2 goals, Roman Josi. Number 2 started the game with 33 saves on 35 shots, Pekka Rinne. Number 3 started the game with a goal, Kyle Turris. Kings over the Flames 4-3 in overtime. That's a nice win for LA. Rebuilding team going in there at Calgary. Tough place to play to steal a game from them. They're 1-1. Calgary's 1-1-1. Number 1 started the game with 2 goals and an assist, Matthew Tkachuk. Number 2 started the game with a goal and 2 assists, including the overtime winner, Drew Doughty. Number 3 started the game with an assist, Anze Kopitar. Bruins over the Golden Knights 4-3. That was the game of the night. Possible Stanley Cup preview. The Bruins come out on top. They're 3-0-0. Vegas is 2-1-0. Number 1 started the game with 2 goals and assists, Brad Marchand. Number 2 started the game with a goal and 2 assists, David Pastrnak. And the number 3 started the game with a goal, Riley Smith. Tonight's games, only 3 on the slate. 7 o'clock, the Canadiens at the Sabres. Neither of these teams have a regulation loss yet. Same division. Could go a long way in determining who stays in the hunt for the playoffs longer, potentially. I think the best player in this game is Jack Eichel. Best unit? This is tough. I would say it's either Buffalo's offense or Carey Price. The worst unit in this game is Buffalo's goaltending. So the biggest weakness on this team is obviously the goaltending of the Sabres. But that game's not on national TV, so I don't pick it. 7:30 NBCSN, the Devils at the Flyers. Doc Emrick, Eddie Olczyk, Brian Boucher on the call. So Jack Hughes' national television debut. I'm interested to see how he plays. The Devils have only played 2 games so far, and I don't think he has a point yet on the season. The funny thing about these 2 teams is that these 2 teams picked 1 and 2 overall a few years ago. Nico Hischier went 1 to the Devils, and Nolan Patrick went 2 to Philly. Nolan Patrick was thought out to be the better prospect for a long time, and then Hischier just passed him and was picked number 1 by the Devils. And so far, Hischier's been a better player than Nolan Patrick in the NHL. The best unit in this game is the Flyers' offense. The best player playing in this game is Claude Giroux. And the weakness of this game, the team unit weakness, is the Devils' goaltending. I'm going to take the Flyers here to win at home. They've only played the 1 game overseas against the Blackhawks, and they got the win in what was a competitive game. I think that they'll come out on national TV, perform well. I think Carter Hart will make some big saves. I think Philly comes away with a 5-2 victory, and I don't think it will be that close. Maybe the Devils get a goal in garbage time. I just think both these teams are good, but I just think Philly's better. That's all. 10 o'clock, NBCSN, the Kings at the Canucks. The Kings obviously are coming off that nice win at Calgary. The Canucks are winless, so it's fair to say that they're due for a win. The best unit in this game, to me, is either Vancouver's offense or Jonathan Quick. I think the weakness unit, the biggest weak link unit, this is tough. I still say it's the Canucks defense because Drew Doughty's still on the Kings defense. Although the Canucks defense has improved with Quinn Hughes and bringing in Tyler Myers. But as far as I'm concerned, Alec Martinez and Drew Doughty are still playing on that Kings blue line. So I'm going to say the Kings blue line is better than the Canucks blue line. So therefore, the biggest weakness in this game, unit-wise, is the Canucks defense. The Canucks defense. And then the best player playing in this game, I'd say, is Anze Kopitar, although you could argue that Elias Pettersson is the best player playing in this game. And this is a good opportunity for the Canucks to show themselves to the national audience in the United States that they are indeed an improved team this year. And I think they'll win this game. Low scoring. I'm going to say 3-2 Canucks. I think Markstrom will get some big saves. I think Quick will keep LA in the game, assuming it is Quick going for Los Angeles. Although either way, I still think the Canucks will win this game. Low scoring because of the goalies. And I won't be shocked at all if LA came away with the win here, though. So give me Vancouver here at home to earn their first win of the season. The WNBA Finals, Game 4, the Sun defeated the Mystics by a score of 90-86. What a huge win for the Sun to even this thing up. And now winner take all Game 5 tomorrow night. I'm going to see if Jeff wants to come on tomorrow night because Game 5 is tomorrow night, and I think it'd be more fitting if he was on tomorrow's podcast than today's. And plus, we have the two games on at 5 and an 8:30. So I think I would have had to rush Jeff a little bit if I had to have him on today. So I'm going to ask him if he can come on tomorrow instead. So we have more to talk about in more time. But anyway, Alyssa Thomas led the way for Connecticut, 17 points. 11 assists, 8 rebounds. She's really turned herself into a really good all-around player. Courtney Williams had 16 points and 7 boards. Jaquel Jones had 18 points and 13 boards. Thomas had 14 and 5 assists. And their bench didn't even do anything. It was all the starters that scored in double digits, and that's credit to those guys, or I should say girls. Elena Delle Donne had a disappointing game. 11 points and 5 boards. Played well defensively, though. And then Atkins had 14. Cloud had 13. Tolliver only had 7. Emma Messiman off the bench had 12 points and 5 boards. And she might be the MVP the entire playoffs. Although I think if Washington wins, it's going to be Delle Donne because it's Delle Donne. And then Powers had 15 off the bench. So we'll pick Thursday's game on tomorrow's podcast, obviously, because tomorrow's Thursday. Next up, NBA preseason. We had a couple games last night. The 76ers defeated the Guangzhou Long Lions 144-86. Ben Simmons had 21 points, and he had a three-pointer that had that crowd going crazy. Joel Embiid had 17 points. Josh Richardson had 16 points. He's really to me, one of the underrated newcomers in the league in terms of role players that change teams. Don't sleep on Josh Richardson in Philadelphia. I think he could do a solid job replacing Redick there. And then James Ennis off the bench had 11. Al Horford only had 8. Tobias Harris only had 7. And then Matthias Thybulle off the bench, by the way, had 10 for Philly. The Heat defeated the Spurs 107-89. Jimmy Butler, did he play in this game? Yes, he did. He had 10 points and 5 assists. Bam Adebayo had 14 and 8. Justice Winslow had 11. Off the bench, Goran Dragic had 8. Tyler Herro had 18. Danielle Jones Jr. had 11. And for the Spurs, Jakob Poeltl, DeJounte Murray, and LaMarcus Aldridge each had 8 points. Bryn Forbes had only 5. DeMar DeRozan only had 10. Rudy Gay had 12. So not a good performance from the Spurs. Granted, it's preseason, so I'm not going to overreact. Thunder over the Mavericks, 119-104. Nationally televised game on ESPN. I think it was Mark Jones and Jeff Van Gundy that did call it. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander had a nice debut for the Thunder with 24 points. Dennis Schroeder had 13. Steven Adams had 17. Chris Paul only had 6. But he only played in 17 minutes, didn't shoot the ball that much. Danilo Gallinari had 10 with 9 rebounds. Off the bench, Terrence Ferguson had 12. Meanwhile, for Dallas, Tim Hardaway only had 3. No Doncic or Porzingis in this game. Dorian Finney-Smith only had 6. Justin Jackson had 12. The Grizzlies defeated the New Zealand Breakers 104-98. Jaren Jackson Jr. had 18 for Memphis. John Moran only had 4 but had 10 assists. Jay Crowder had 15 with 5 boards. Tyus Jones had 13 off the bench. Grayson Allen had 18 off the bench. The Suns defeated the Timberwolves 111-106. DeAndre Ayton had 18 points for the Suns with 13 rebounds. Ricky Rubio had 11. Devin Booker had 15. Off the bench, Frank Kaminsky had 14. Ty Jerome had 12. And Elia Kobo had 13. Meanwhile, for Minnesota, Karl Anthony Towns, 19 points, 10 boards, 5 assists. Andrew Wiggins only had 6. Robert Covington only had 2. Noah Vonleh off the bench had 6. Gorgie Dang off the bench had 10. Jarrett Culver off the bench had 11, shot 5 for 8, so he's had a nice debut. And then Trevor Graham had 10. Nuggets over the Blazers 105-94. That was on national TV. Paul Millsap had 14. Lead the way for Denver. Jamal Murray had 10. Jokic didn't play. Off the bench, Michael Porter Jr. had 9 points, shot 4 for 7 in his NBA preseason debut. Monte Morris had 12 off the bench. Malik Beasley had 12 off the bench. And Jeremy Grant had 13 off the bench. I'm interested to see if they actually do end up starting Jeremy Grant. Or he would be an excellent 6th man for them. So don't sleep on Jeremy Grant for the 6th Man of the Year award. And then meanwhile, for Portland, Mario Hezonja had 12 points, and that was off the bench. Scala BCA had 10 points with 12 boards. Zach Collins had 10. Lillard only had 5. McCollum only had 7. They only played 15 minutes each. Hassan Whiteside had 7. He only played 12 minutes. Kent Bazemore played 20 minutes, only had 5 points. Anthony Tolliver played 15 minutes, had 2 points in that game. Tonight's slate, 7 o'clock, the Mavericks at the Pistons. The Wizards host the Guangzhou Long Lions. 7:30, the Heat at the Hornets, the Magic at the Hawks. 8 o'clock, the Jazz at the Bucks. And ESPN, the Pelicans at the Bulls. So Zion against Lauri Markkanen and Kobe White and the Chicago Bulls. So that's an interesting one. That's going to be on ESPN. I'm interested to see who's on the call for this game. I don't know if they'd fly out Ryan Ruocco from Connecticut to Chicago. I know Mark Jones did the first game last night and Dave Pasch did the second game. Maybe we'll see Jones again because he was just in Oklahoma City. So It might be Jones. It could be Breen. Although it'd be weird if it was Breen. You have to see what the Knicks are doing in the preseason. So if I had to make a guess, maybe it's Mark Jones and maybe Jeff Van Gundy again. We'll see. So that's something somewhat interesting to see who calls the preseason games. Mike Breen normally doesn't do ESPN preseason games. It's normally Pash and Mark Jones, sometimes Ryan Rucco. And sometimes they find a random, like a Mark Hastisher or something like that. Wouldn't sleep on him calling tonight's game either. Next up, the bowl projections for week number 7 of the college football season. I made some changes because some teams suffered their second losses, and I had to bump them out of the New Year's Six picture for now. So, without further ado, here we go. The college football playoff. I have the same, except I switched seed numbers for Ohio State and Clemson. I have Ohio State, the 2 seed out, and Clemson as your 3 seed. Clemson, I don't think, has had the impressive wins that Ohio State has had, just like them beating Nebraska and then beating Michigan State. So they beat better teams than what Clemson has faced so far. That's why I have Clemson number 3 and Ohio State number 2. And then Georgia's number 1 over Alabama because Georgia has the win over Notre Dame. And someone tell me what Alabama's best win is? I know they can improve their resume with a win over Texas A&M as well because that's a common opponent of Clemson, who Clemson also beat. And so wouldn't rule out myself putting Alabama a little bit higher next week if they get the Texas A&M win. But I just have to look at the rest of Bama's resume compared to Clemson, so maybe I'll flop them. Rest of the New Year's Six Bowls, the Cotton Bowl, Boise State against Florida. I have the Gators in there now. The Orange Bowl, I have Virginia against Notre Dame. The Rose Bowl, Utah against Wisconsin. The Sugar Bowl, LSU against Oklahoma. The other bowl games, Bahamas Bowl, North Texas and Western Michigan. The Frisco Bowl, SMU against Army. New Mexico Bowl, Southern Miss and San Diego State. Cure Bowl, Houston and Troy. Boca Raton Bowl, Navy and Ohio. Camellia Bowl, Eastern Michigan and Louisiana. The Vegas Bowl, Utah State against Colorado. I had Stanford written on the list, but I knew that was wrong. New Orleans Bowl, FAU and Appalachian State. Gasparilla Bowl, Temple against Louisiana Tech. Hawaii Bowl, BYU against Hawaii. Independence Bowl, UAB against Virginia Tech. Quick Lane Bowl, Boston College against Michigan State. Military Bowl, UCF against Duke. Pinstripe Bowl, North Carolina and Penn State. Texas Bowl, Iowa State and Texas A&M. Holiday Bowl, Minnesota and Oregon. Cheez-It Bowl, Arizona State against Oklahoma State. Camping World Bowl, Wake Forest against Baylor. First Responder Bowl, Marshall against Texas Tech. Music City Bowl, Florida State against Tulane. Red Box Bowl, Northwestern against Arizona State. Belk Bowl, Pitt against California, my bad. Sun Bowl, North Carolina State against Washington State. Liberty Bowl, Memphis against Kansas State. Arizona Bowl, Fresno State against Georgia Southern. Alamo Bowl, Texas against Washington. Citrus Bowl, Michigan against Auburn. Outback Bowl, Nebraska against Kentucky. Birmingham Bowl, Stanford against Cincinnati. Gator Bowl, Iowa against Mississippi State. Famous Idaho Potato Bowl, Ball State against San Diego State. Armed Forces Bowl, Liberty against Air Force. And the Mobile Alabama Bowl, Toledo against Arkansas State. NHL Power Rankings for the second week of the season. There's some changes I made to the preseason ones, with some teams getting off the fast starts and other teams getting off the slow starts. I want to talk about the teams and what's to come, or some results that they have had, and some thoughts. 31 is the Ottawa Senators. I thought that this was the worst team in the league before the season, and it looks that way right now. Their 2 games were losses, one at Toronto and the other at home against the Rangers. I think the strength of this team is their youth on offense, like Colin White and Brady Tkachuk. Like, those guys still have to develop. And then their weakness to me is their defense, who traded away Cody Ceci, who I think could be a good player in a different situation. They have Thomas Chabot, who's a good player, but the rest of their defense is left to be desired. 30th Los Angeles Kings. They've only played 2 games, and I give them credit for that Calgary win. But I just don't think that this will last at all. In their other game, they lost. I believe it was at the Coyotes, if I'm not mistaken. No, the Coyotes are winless. So their other game, they lost at the Oilers on Saturday night, 5-6. So they're competitive in that game. So the strength of the Kings, to me, is still Jonathan Quick behind the net. To me, their biggest weakness is, I don't know if it's fair to say they're D, because they're not deep. And their offense, they're really not deep. And their offense has actually been pretty solid so far. So I'm going to say their weakness is their defense outside of their top pairing. I obviously think this team is headed for a major rebuild. Number 29 is the Minnesota Wild, who are winless. They lost at Nashville against the Predators, and then they lost at Colorado on Saturday night. The strength of their team is Devin Dubnyk behind the net. He'll keep them in a lot of games. And then their weakness, to me, is their depth on offense. They have a lot of guys that really haven't panned out yet. A lot of guys that are getting up there in age, like Zach Parise and Mikko Koivu. So, to me, their weakness really is their offense, and Dubnyk will keep them in a bunch of games. Number 28 is the Columbus Blue Jackets. They are 1-2. They have a win over Buffalo, which came on Monday night in overtime. Friday night, they lost at home against the Maple Leafs in their opener, and then they got their asses kicked on Saturday night in Pittsburgh against the Penguins. The strength of the Blue Jackets, to me, is their offense, even though that they got rid of Artemi Panarin and Matt Duchene. They still have Pierre-Luc Dubois. They still have Nick Foligno and Cam Atkinson. And they do have some depth there. And to me, their weakness is in goal. I just think that they'll miss Sergei Bobrovsky. They're already giving up a bunch of goals. Although, I do believe that their starting goaltender will be solid in the long run, but right now, it's a weakness of their team. Number 27 is the Arizona Coyotes, who are winless on the season. They lost against the Anaheim Ducks in their first game in Anaheim, and then they got shut out at home by the Bruins. The Bruins loss is nothing to write home about, and neither is the Ducks loss because it was at Anaheim, and both those teams are kind of even, especially playing at Anaheim. So I can't really fault them for their 0-2. Tough for schedule coming up, though. Coyotes, Avalanche, and Jets, and Predators on deck. To me, the strength of their team is their talent on offense. They have some dudes there, like Clayton Keller and Derek Stepan. And then they add in Phil Kessel to the mix, who should be able to improve them offensively. And to me, their weakness is in goal. Although, so far, so good, I just don't know if that works the whole season. Number 26 is the New York Islanders. They are 1-2 on the season. They have the home loss to the Oilers, home loss to the Capitals, and then the home win over the Winnipeg Jets. So, a little bit of a sketchy start for them. Next up, they have Hurricanes, Panthers, Blues, and then at Winnipeg again. So, they get the Jets out of the way. You get the Jets at a good time because of their defense being such a mess. Although they did step up last night. We'll get to the Jets when we get to them. To me, the strength of the Islanders team is their defense. I really think their defense is very good. They have Noah Dobson now, who got his first NHL point last night. So I think their defense is actually the strength of their team, and I think their weakness is in goal. I really hated that decision to let go of Robin Lehner, and I think it could possibly keep them out of the playoffs. Number 25 is the Chicago Blackhawks, who are 0-1-0 to start the year. They only had the one game, a loss against the Flyers. Coming up, they have a nice homestand here. Sharks, Jets, Oilers, Blue Jackets, Capitals, Golden Knights, all in a row. Some hard games. Sharks might be due for a win, so that's not a win for guarantees standpoint. Oilers off to a good start, catching Winnipeg at a good time. Blackhawks should beat the Blue Jackets at home. Now it's obviously a team that's in a transition phase. I think the strength of the Blackhawks is their offense, led by Patrick Kane, Alex DeBrincat, Jonathan Taves. So they have a nice little mojo on offense, and I think their weakness is their defense. I just don't think that Duncan Keith and Brent Seabrook are the same players anymore. Number 24 is the Vancouver Canucks, who had a tough opening night loss against the Oilers and then got shut out against the Flames on Saturday night. They have the big national game tonight against the Kings, and then they host the Flyers and the Red Wings after that. I think the strength of the Canucks is their offense, their young core, led by Brock Besser, Elias Pettersson, and Bo Horvat. And I think their weakness is their defense, which we talked about already. Number 23 is the Detroit Red Wings, 2-1 start for them. Very nice to see that from them. They have wins at the Predators and home against the Stars. Those are two really good wins. And then they lost at home against Anaheim. Coming up for them is at the Canadiens. That's tough. Mike Babcock comes back to town on Saturday, and then they're at the Canucks at the Flames to start off a little West Coast action for them. I think the strength of this Red Wings team is their offense, led by Dylan Larkin, Anthony Mantha, and Tyler Bertuzzi. I think their weakness is their defense. Although you could argue Jimmy Howard in his past his prime stage of his goaltending. But I'm going to say that their defense is a bigger weakness. Although Mike Green is a good defensive player, but I don't know who else is really reliable for them defensively. Number 22 is the Florida Panthers. They are 1-2 to start the season. They split a home and home with the Lightning, and they lost at home against the Hurricanes. Coming up is Sabres, Islanders, Devils, Avalanche. I think the strength of this Panthers team is their offense, led by the likes of Jonathan Huberdeau, Vincent Trocheck, and a bunch of other guys that they have, and I think their weakness is their defensive depth outside of Aaron Ekblad and Keith Yandel. Number 21 is the San Jose Sharks. They are winless, but they're winless because they've had a bunch of injuries and some turmoil going on. They have 2 losses against Golden Knights, one at home and once on the road. They lost at the Ducks, and then they lost at the Predators. Coming up for them, at the Blackhawks, home Sharks, home Flames at home Hurricanes, and then home and home with the Sabres. So that's an interesting slate coming up. I think the strength of the Sharks is their offense, led by the likes of Evander Kane and Timo Meier and Thomas Hertl, and then all the veterans there like Joe Thornton, and Patrick Marleau's now back on that team as well. And I think their weakness is in goal. Like, Martin Jones has really yet to improve on last season. Number 20 is the New Jersey Devils. They are 0-1-1 to start the year, only 2 games. They lost in overtime against the Jets, and then they got their asses kicked by the Sabres the next night. I think that the biggest strength of their team is actually their defense, which I think is sneakily very good, led by PK Subban and Sami Vatanen. And and they have some breakout candidates on defense as well, although their offense should be better this year. But I just really like their defense with the addition with Subban, and I think that is actually the strength of their team that can mask their weakness, which is their goaltending. And that is such an obvious weakness that's really showed in these first 2 games of the season. Coming up for New Jersey tonight at the Flyers on national TV. Then they host the Oilers, so Taylor Hall revenge game spot. And then home against the Panthers. And then on NBCSN, home against the Rangers on the 17th, which should be a fantastic game from the Rock. Number 19 is the Dallas Stars. They are off to a slow start this season. They are 1-3. They have wins over, or just one win over the Capitals in overtime, and then they have losses. Home Bruins, at the Blues, at the Red Wings coming up for them. Home Flames, home Capitals, at Sabres, at Blue Jackets, so a little bit of Eastern Conference in there. And then a big game against the Flames tomorrow night at home. The strength of this Stars team, to me, is Ben Bishop. I know everyone likes to talk about their offense, but you got to give the goaltending some credit. Yeah, they gave up 4 goals against the Red Wings, but that was on the road, back-to-back, second of the back-to-back. So that's understandable. But yeah, Bishop really has fixed their goaltending situation, and he's a darn good goaltender when he's healthy. And I think their weakness is their depth on offense. I mean, everyone likes to talk about the names on offense like Sagan and Jamie Benn, and Radulov, obviously, but like they don't have much depth offensively behind those guys and Roop Hintz. I'm sorry. Number 18 is the Anaheim Ducks. Off to a nice 3-0 start this year. They have wins over Arizona, San Jose, and Detroit. 1 road win and 2 home wins. Coming up, they're at the Penguins, at the Blue Jackets, at the Bruins, and then they come home to play the Sabres and the Hurricanes. So a little bit of a East Coast trip there for Anaheim. I think the strength of the Ducks team is John Gibson in net. I had a Twitter troll say that he's terrible, but no, he's not. He's a good goalie, and he's the main reason why they're 3-0 to start the season. I think their biggest weakness is their depth on offense, outside of their key guys like Raquel and Silverberg, because obviously the injury to Ryan Kessler doesn't hurt, and they got rid of Corey Perry. So I'm not sold on their offensive depth, and I think that's their biggest weakness right now. Number 17 is the Philadelphia Flyers. They've only played 1 game, and they got 1 win over the Chicago Blackhawks. Coming up, a big home game tonight against the Devils. Then they go to the West Coast to play the Canucks, the Flames, and the Oilers. And the Oilers game is on NBCSN next Wednesday night. So that should be interesting. The strength of the Flyers team we talked about earlier is their offense. And to me, this is tough. But their depth on defense, I think, is a small weakness, but not a big weakness. I think this is a good team, and I think eventually could top the top 10 in these power rankings. And the only reason why they're this slow is because they've only played 1 game, and that's not their own fault. The Habs are number 16 on my list. They are 1-0-1 to start the year. They won in overtime at Toronto, and then they lost. It was a shootout win at Toronto, and then a shootout loss at the Hurricanes. Coming up at the Sabres tonight, home Red Wings, home Blues, home Lightning. So a nice homestand here. And by the way, the Lightning game on NBCSN, so that's a good national showcase game for the Canadians. I think we talked about this. The strength of their team is Carey Price, and the weakness of the Canadians, to me, is their depth offensively. I think their defense is good. I think their depth offensively, beyond the likes of Brendan Gallagher, Jonathan Drouin, Jesperi Kotkaniemi, Nick Suzuki, is a lot of unknowns, in my opinion. Tatar, obviously, is a good player. Can't leave him out. Number 15 is the Pittsburgh Penguins. They're 1-2 to start the season. They lost at home against Buffalo to start the year, and then they crushed Columbus on Saturday night, and then they lost last night to Winnipeg. Coming up, they're home Ducks, at the Wild, at the Jets, home against the Avalanche. Avalanche game on NBCSN next Wednesday night. The strength of the Penguins is their offense, led by Sidney Crosby, and, well, Malkin's hurt, so I can't include him really right now. Jake Gensel, Alex Galchenyuk, this is a good opportunity for him to get going without Malkin there. And I think the weakness is obviously their defense. I just think that unit is aging. They have a lot of overpriced guys like Jack Johnson on their defense. Number 14 is the Winnipeg Jets. They're 2-2-0 to start the season. They have wins over the Devils and at the Penguins, and then they lost to the Rangers and they lost to the Islanders. Coming up for Winnipeg is their home opener against the Wild tomorrow night. Then at the Blackhawks, home Penguins, home Coyotes, and then home Islanders. So they get the Islanders and the Penguins done out of the way early in the season. So that's a little bit of a weird scheduling quirk there. I think the strength of this Jets team is clearly their offense, led by Patrick Laine, Mark Sheffley, Blake Wheeler. There's a lot of guys that they can rely on offensively. And defensively is obviously their biggest weakness, obviously without Bufflin there. They have to rely on guys like Neil Pionk and Josh Morrissey. Yikes. Number 13 is the Edmonton Oilers. They're 3-0 to start the season, 6 points. They have wins over LA, the Islanders, and the Canucks coming up for them. At the Devils tomorrow night, at the Rangers on Saturday, at the Blackhawks on Monday, and then they host the Flyers on NBCSN rivalry night next Wednesday. The strength of this team is their offense, led by Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, even James Neal's into the fun now. Can't leave him out with his 6 goals. And then their weakness to me is still in goal. Like, I don't think Mike Smith's an upgrade at all. If anything, they could possibly be a downgrade. You never know. But I just don't like Mike Smith at all, and I think he's past his prime. Number 12 is the Buffalo Sabres, who are off to an excellent start this season. They are 2-0-1 with a rousing win against the Devils, a road win at Pittsburgh, and then their lone loss came in overtime against Columbus. Coming up home tonight against the Canadiens, a bit of a proving game for Buffalo there. Home Panthers, home Stars, at the Ducks to kick off a West Coast trip next week. So these next 3 home games for Buffalo are pretty big before going out to the West Coast, and I think they're all winnable as well. The strength of their team, in my opinion, is their offense, led by Jack Eichel, Casey Middlestat, Sam Reinhart. There's a bunch of guys. Even their defense is a strength. And then I talked about it before, the clear weakness of this team is their goaltending. And it's not even close. Number 11 is the New York Rangers, who are 2-0 to start the season, 4 points. Great start for the Rangers. They have wins over the Jets and at the Senators. 2 games on paper that they really should win. They're favored in both of those games. They're kind of on a bye this week. And coming up on Saturday, they host the Oilers. Then Thursday night on NBCSN, the 17th, they're at the Devils. And then back-to-back at the Capitals. And then after that, on the 20th of October, the Canucks come to town for a nice date there. And the strength of the Rangers is their offense, led by Mika Zibanejad, Artemi Panarin. Kaapo Kakko hasn't had a point yet, but he's impressed so far. And then their weakness, I'm going to say, even though it is improved, but I still think it's their biggest weakness, and that is obviously their defense. I think it's improved with the additions of Jacob Trouba and Adam Fox, but Brendan Smith and Mark Stahl on a contender should not even be a bottom pairing. And they do have other options. I think that if Libor Hajek makes a jump and then they have guys in the minors that I think can make jumps, then they could potentially scratch those guys down the road. Although Stahl's a good veteran that actually scored their first goal of the season. but Brendan Smith's just atrocious. So, to me, their defense is still the weakness of their team, although you could argue Lundqvist is getting up there in age, that he's a bigger possible weakness than their defense. Number 10 is the Calgary Flames. They are 1-1-1 on the year. They have a win at home over the Canucks, a loss at the Avalanche, and then an overtime loss against the Kings at home. Coming up for them, at the Stars tomorrow night, at the Golden Knights Saturday night, at the Sharks Sunday night. So a little bit of West Coast there, and then they host the Flyers on Tuesday. The strength of this team, to me, is their offense, led by Johnny Gaudreau and all the other fun pieces they have, Matthew Tkachuk. And then their weakness, although I think Rittich will eventually be better, but right now I think their goaltending is their biggest weakness. Although if Rittich improves, they don't have to improve it. If he doesn't improve, then they can make a trade to upgrade there. Number 9 is the Nashville Predators, who are 2-1 to start the season. They have wins over the Wild and San Jose, home loss against the Red Wings. Coming up for them, they host the Capitals tomorrow night. That's a big game. At the Kings, at the Golden Knights, at the Coyotes. So a little bit of West Coast for them into the weekend and through next week. The strength of the Predators is their defense, led by Roman Josi. And they have Ryan Ellis there. Matthias Ekholm, Dante Fabro, the rookie. They're very deep on defense, and that's the strength of their team. And to me, their biggest weakness is the age of Pekka Rinne. And will that hurt them down the road in the playoffs? Number 8 is the St. Louis Blues. 2-0-1 to start the year. First place in the division with 5 points. They have wins over the Stars and the Maple Leafs, and then they have the overtime home loss against the Capitals coming up there, at the Senators tomorrow night, at the Canadiens on Saturday, at the Islanders on Monday, and then they come home next Thursday to host the Canucks. So a little bit of East Coast for for St. Louis right now. I think the strength of the Blues team, this is tough because they have a couple strengths. I'm going to say their offense, led by Ryan O'Reilly and Vladimir Tarasenko. And if there's a weakness to me there, maybe it's their defense depth, but it's not a huge weakness. But they tried to upgrade it this offseason by bringing in the guy from the Hurricanes in the trade. And then Vince Dunn's there as well. Number 7, I have the Tampa Bay Lightning, who are 1-1-1 to start the year. Split a home and home with the Panthers, and then they lost in overtime against Carolina. Coming up tomorrow, they're at the Maple Leafs, at the Senators, NBCSN Tuesday night at the Canadiens, and then at the Bruins on Thursday. So a little bit of a road trip here for the Lightning within their division. The strength of the Lightning is still their offense, led by Braden Point, Steven Stamkos, Nikita Kucherov. And to me, their weakness is their defense depth. Anton Strawman's gone. Kevin Shattenkirk's in. Shattenkirk, to me, isn't a good defensive player at all. So I think their defense depth is their weakness. Number 6, the Washington Capitals. 4-0 on the year. Clearly the best team in the Metro Division. They have 2 wins over... They're 4-0-1. That's a mistake. Oh, no, I'm looking at Carolina. My bad. The Capitals are 2-0-2. They have the 2 losses, respectively, in a shootout and in overtime. 2 overtime losses against the Hurricanes and the Stars, both at home. And they have the overtime win at the Blues, and then they beat the Islanders on Friday night. Coming up tomorrow night, they're at the Predators, at the Stars. Next week to kick off, home Avalanche and then home Maple Leafs. So a nice little stretch there for Washington to pick up some good wins against good teams. To me, the strength of their team is their offense, led by Alex Ovechkin, Evgeny Kuznetsov, and Nicholas Backstrom. Weakness, I'm going to say their defense depth, to me, still isn't so great. Number 5 is the Toronto Maple Leafs. They're 2-1-1 to start the year. They have wins over Ottawa and Toronto, shootout loss against the Canadiens, and then the home loss against the Blues on Monday. Coming up tomorrow night in a bit of a prove-it game at home against the Lightning. Saturday night, they're at the Red Wings and Babcock's return. Next week, to start off, they host the Wild, and they're at the Capitals. Back-to-back for them there. To me, the strength of the Maple Leafs is their offense, led by Austin Matthews, John Tavares, Mitch Marner, and William Nylander. And if I had to nitpick a weakness, I think it's something that they'll improve at the deadline, is their defense depth. I feel like that's a weakness for a lot of these contenders. I think that they can easily improve at the deadline. Number 4 is the Carolina Hurricanes. They're 4-0 to start the year. They have a shootout win over the Canadiens, an overtime win over the Hurricanes, an overtime win over the Lightning, and then a regulation win over the Panthers. Coming up for them Friday night, they host the Islanders in a playoff rematch, and then they host the Blue Jackets. That's a back-to-back, and then next week to kick off, they go on the West Coast to face the Kings and the Sharks on a back-to-back, so that's going to be a little hard for Carolina. So I think it's big that they get off to this nice start. To me, the strength of this team is their offense, led by Sebastian Aho and Teuvo Teravainen, and to me, their weakness is in goal. I just don't think that they could have the goaltending to go on another deep playoff run. I think they'll miss Curtis McElhinney. Number 3 is the Colorado Avalanche. They've only played 2 games so far. That was my cup pick before the season. They are 2-0, though, to start the year, with wins over the Flames and the Wild. Tomorrow night, they return to action as they host the Bruins. And then Saturday night, they host the Coyotes. And then they go on the road a little bit at the Capitals, at the Penguins. And then the Penguin game is on NBCSN. To me, the strength of the Avs is their offense, led by Mikko Rantanen, Gabriel Landeskog, and Nathan MacKinnon. To me, their weakness is in goal. I know Gaubauer's had moments, but he needs to prove it to me, especially in the playoffs. Number 2 to me is the Vegas Golden Knights. This was my preseason number 1 team. They're 2-1. The one loss came at home against the Bruins the other night, and then their 2 wins came over San Jose. And coming up for them, at the Coyotes tomorrow night, host the Flames on Saturday night, at the Kings on Sunday night, so a back-to-back there, and then Tuesday they host the Predators, and then next Thursday night they host the Senators. So after a couple tough ones, it evens up a little bit with the Senators. To me, the strength of the Golden Knights, this is tough. I think that their strength is their offense, led by Max Pacioretty, Mark Stone, Paul Stastny, Cody Glass. They have a bunch of guys offensively. Jonathan Marchessault, obviously William Karlsson. And to me, their weakness is backup goaltending. I just am not convinced that Malcolm Subban is the guy to be a backup goaltender, let alone a starter. That guy's really not panned out to be the prospect that many people thought he'd be. And number 1, the Boston Bruins, 3-0 to start the year. They have the great win at Vegas. They have the win at Dallas and then a win at Arizona. I think that Knights win is really what propelled them to number 1 for me. And then after they go to the Avalanche tomorrow night, they finally start their homestand home opener Saturday night at home against the Devils. And then on Columbus Day afternoon, they host the Ducks. And then Thursday night, they host the Lightning in what is a big statement game for both of those teams, really. Especially what happened to the Lightning last year. All right. I think the strength of this Bruins team is their offense, led by David Pastrnak and Patrice Bergeron. They have David Krejci coming back. Brad Marchand's still there. And to me, their weakness, I'm just not convinced that Tuukka Rask is a franchise goalie anymore. So I'm going to say their goaltending is a bit of a weakness for the Boston Bruins. Next up, college football. Before I do best bet, I'm going to make my pick tonight. You have Appalachian State against UL Lafayette at Louisiana. The game, I believe, is on ESPNU, so you'll be able to watch it on TV. The Mountaineers, I believe, are favored by, I don't know, UL Lafayette's now a 1.5 point favorite. App State was a 1 point favorite yesterday. Now Louisiana Lafayette's a 1.5 favorite. The over-under 69.5. I'm taking Appalachian State getting the 1.5. They're minus 103 on the money line. So the play here, App State wins the game on the field. I'm getting a 1.5. Money line minus 103. And now my best bet of the day, brought to you by DraftKings. I'm going with App State. And then I'm going to go to the baseball playoffs and take the Cardinals as a short favorite and the Nats as a nice underdog. Let's go to hockey. And we'll take the Flyers and the Canucks. So that's 5 teams. 26.41 odds. Laying $1. Payout $27.41. That's it for the podcast today. I'll be back tomorrow with tomorrow night's pick for Game 5 between the Astros and the Rays. College football, NFL, you have the Giants and the Patriots tomorrow, so we'll preview that. And the NBA preseason, more hockey, and my best bet as well. Jeff Maglicetti tomorrow night as well. WNBA Finals, Game 5, we'll pick that as well. Hope you guys have a great day, everybody.